Elias had always thought that working as a human diplomat in the interstellar hub would be exciting, but he had never imagined anything like this. The hub was a massive space station orbiting a blue gas giant, a place where dozens of alien species met to trade, negotiate, and sometimes argue. For Elias, it had always been a job full of strange customs and difficult conversations, but he liked it. Humans were respected here because of their honesty, courage, and the surprising way they could adapt to almost any situation. On this particular day, the hub was alive with anticipation. Banners floated through the artificial gravity, and floating holograms announced the arrival of Princess Kaelira, the noble of a species called the Letharians. Her people were tall, with shimmering silver skin and eyes that reflected every light in the room. They were known throughout the galaxy for their power, wealth, and strict traditions. Kaelira herself was famous not just for her royal title, but for her intelligence, skill in negotiation, and her beauty. Elias stood near the center of the main hall, trying to appear calm as he watched the Letharian delegation approach. He had met Kaelira once before, during a diplomatic briefing, and she had seemed curious about humans. That curiosity, however, had now turned into something unexpected. Elias could see her eyes lock onto him as she moved gracefully toward the stage set for the cultural ceremony. When Kaelira finally reached him, she stopped and looked directly into his eyes. "Human," she said, her voice melodic but commanding. "I wish to marry you." The hall fell silent. Aliens of every shape and size paused mid-step. Holographic banners flickered. Even the station's automated announcement system seemed to hesitate, as if it too could not process what had just happened. Elias blinked. He had expected curiosity, questions, maybe even a compliment. But this? A proposal? Out of nowhere? And in front of the entire interstellar assembly? "I thank you," Elias said carefully, "but I cannot accept." Kaelira's silver eyes widened in shock. She took a step closer, tilting her head slightly. "You refuse? Why? Do you not understand the honor of my offer? Do you not wish to gain power, respect, and security beyond your species' imagination?" Elias shook his head. "It is not about honor or power," he said gently. "Humans do not marry for status or advantage. Marriage is a personal bond. It must be built on trust, respect, and choice. I cannot accept something I do not truly feel." The murmurs around the hall grew louder. Some aliens whispered in astonishment, others in outrage. Kaelira, however, seemed frozen. Her species had never been refused before, at least not in this way, never publicly. Elias could see the confusion in her expression slowly turn into frustration, then something else, curiosity.
"You do not want me?" she asked almost softly. "But I have given you everything."
"The prestige of my house, the protection of my people. I am told humans are rare, that your kind is interesting to my species, and yet you turn me away?" Elias stepped forward slightly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "It is not about you being rare or me being human," he said. "I respect you and your people, but I cannot marry simply because it is expected, or because someone else thinks it should happen. Humans choose their partners freely. That is our tradition." Kaelira's silver eyes flashed, reflecting the lights above. "Then you are different from the stories I have heard about your kind. You are stubborn, perhaps even foolish." "Perhaps," Elias admitted with a small smile, "but I would rather be stubborn than dishonest." The Letharian crowd seemed shocked into silence again. Even the ambassadors from other species looked uncertain. Kaelira, however, took a step back, folding her arms. She had expected obedience, a bow, maybe a polite refusal that would soften into eventual acceptance. She had not expected this. She had never faced refusal before, and certainly never from a human. "Very well," she said finally, though her voice was tight. You will stay under observation.
I wish to understand this human pride. You are unusual, and I cannot ignore that.
Her words carried a weight that silenced anyone who might have whispered against her. Remain near me during the exchange.
I will see why you reject me. Elias hesitated. This was not part of the protocol.
No human had ever been singled out for close observation by Lytherians before, but refusal had consequences, and he understood that Kalira was not asking lightly. I will comply, he said, as long as it is respectful of my duties and my people. It will be. You will see that I am not unkind. You will also see that humans are different. Perhaps I can understand your kind better. The next few days were a whirlwind. Kalira shadowed Alias everywhere. She watched him negotiate trade deals, mediate disputes, and interact with crew members. She saw the way he listened to each species equally, giving time and attention, without judgment. She noted how humans greeted one another with humor, small kindnesses, and shared responsibility. She began to see why humans were admired in subtle ways, not for wealth or power, but for their loyalty, honesty, and courage. At first, Kalira was impatient. She was used to people obeying her without question. She could not understand why Elias valued equality and consent so much. To her, it seemed inefficient, even foolish. Yet, she could not deny the results. Conflicts were solved with less anger, agreements were stronger, and humans seemed happier than any other species she had observed. One evening, Kalira found herself watching Elias in the station's observation deck, looking out at the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. The stars reflected in his eyes as he laughed at a joke made by a fellow human officer. Kalira felt a strange tug in her chest, something unfamiliar and unwelcome. It was curiosity, yes, but also admiration. This human, who refused her proposal, was teaching her lessons without even speaking, lessons in patience, respect, and choice.
Why do you do this?
She asked suddenly, her voice softer than usual. Why do you refuse me, human? I am told that your species often admires power and opportunity, and yet you reject the greatest honor you could receive in the galaxy. Elias turned to her, offering a calm smile. Because it is not the greatest honor to me. What matters to humans is trust and choice. Love and marriage are built on that, not on status or expectation. You cannot give me something I do not earn in my heart.
Kalira frowned, her mind struggling to understand.
Her species measured worth by achievement, lineage, and obedience. Humans, she realized, measured worth by something she could not yet define. Watching him interact with others, seeing the respect he commanded without fear or intimidation. It was something new, something fascinating. Days passed, and Kalira began to see the truth in Elias's words. She observed him negotiating with patience, comforting a frightened alien child after a minor accident, and admitting mistakes without shame. His courage was quiet but steadfast. His decisions were guided not by pride or fear, but by principle. Slowly, she realized that what she had offered him, prestige, security, power, was meaningless compared to what humans valued most, freedom of choice, and loyalty earned, not given. Yet, she could not fully admit it. To her, refusing someone of her status was not just a personal insult, it was a cultural crisis. Her advisors whispered warnings, reminding her of the expectations of her house. If she persisted in staying close to Elias without resolving the marriage issue, she risked her honor and position. The thought made her restless, but also more determined. She had to understand this human pride. She had to see why he could refuse her, and why that refusal did not seem like weakness. One afternoon, during a formal diplomatic dinner, Kalira finally addressed the room, speaking for the first time since the proposal. Humans are strange, she said. her silver eyes scanning the assembly. "They do not follow our rules, our expectations, or our customs. They act with freedom, but not recklessness. They choose their path. I do not yet understand all of it, but I intend to learn." Elias noticed the subtle change in her tone. She was no longer just a princess demanding compliance. She was questioning, observing, and trying to comprehend a way of life so different from her own. For the first time, he felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps in time she might understand humans not as subjects to impress, but as equals to respect. The ceremony continued, but the energy in the hall had shifted. Aliens whispered quietly, sensing the tension and curiosity between the human and the Letherian princess. Kalira's advisors exchanged worried glances, unsure how their princess's insistence on observing a human would affect her standing. Meanwhile, Elias maintained his calm composure, aware that the next days would test not only his patience, but also the boundaries of interstellar diplomacy. As the evening ended, Kalira walked beside him in silence. She no longer demanded answers. Instead, she seemed thoughtful, studying him as if each small human gesture carried meaning she could not yet fully grasp. Elias felt the weight of her gaze but did not flinch. For the first time, they were not adversaries in expectation, but observers of each other's worlds, each learning and challenging assumptions in quiet ways. And in that quiet moment, far above the swirling clouds of the gas giant below, Kalira began to understand something important. Humans were not weak, nor foolish. They were strong in ways her species had never measured. Strength was not always in power or command. Sometimes it was in choice, in respect, and in the courage to refuse what was expected. For Elias, the lesson was simpler but just as profound. Even in a galaxy full of powerful beings, human values, freedom, honesty, and loyalty could shine brighter than any crown, throne, or title. And so, in the heart of the interstellar hub, a princess and a human began a complicated journey, one not of marriage, but of understanding. Kalira had never been so confused in her life. Every day she followed Elias, the human diplomat who had refused her proposal, and every day she found herself more intrigued by his actions. She could not understand why he treated everyone equally, why he laughed with the young officers, why he spent hours listening to minor complaints from alien merchants, and yet seemed more powerful than any Letherian she had ever known. Her advisors whispered that humans were clever, but she was beginning to feel that cleverness was not the full story. There was something deeper, something harder to define. One morning, Kalira arrived at the human delegation's quarters just as Elias was preparing for a meeting with a group of traders from the Trelkin species. They were small, amphibious creatures known for their bargaining skill and sharp tongues. Most species considered them difficult to deal with, but Elias treated them with patience. He listened, asked questions, and gently guided the negotiations toward mutual benefit. Kalira leaned against the doorway, watching silently. She noticed how the Trelkins relaxed under his guidance, how they smiled and laughed with him, not out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine comfort. He seemed to inspire loyalty simply by listening and respecting them. That was something no Letherian noble had ever done. In her world, respect was demanded, not earned. During the meeting, a Trelkin representative made a mistake in calculation, which could have ruined the trade deal. Other ambassadors would have scolded or humiliated him. Elias, however, simply smiled and said, "We all make mistakes. Let's find a solution together." Kalira felt a strange warmth in her chest. She had expected him to be weak, human and fragile, yet here he was, commanding respect without demanding it, without arrogance or force. After the meeting, Kalira approached him cautiously. "Human, why do you treat them so kindly?" she asked. "If I were in your position, I would demand obedience, correct mistakes harshly, and ensure that my authority is never questioned. Yet you act as though they are equals." Elias smiled softly. "Because they are," he said simply.
Everyone deserves respect. Authority is not proof of worth.
True respect is earned, not given. If you belittle or force someone, you may get results, but they are temporary and fragile. If you treat them with trust, they will give you loyalty that lasts. Kylira frowned. In Lytherian society, loyalty was often bought with favors or maintained through fear. She had never imagined that it could come so naturally, simply through fairness and understanding. She wanted to argue, to prove that humans were naive, but deep down she began to wonder if she had misunderstood her own kind's approach all along. Later that day, Kylira witnessed something that shocked her. A fire broke out in one of the station's residential sectors. The alarm blared, and the automated defenses began sealing doors to contain the flames. Chaos erupted as inhabitants ran for safety. Elias did not hesitate. He ran into the danger zone alongside human rescue teams, guiding panicked aliens to safe zones, helping carry those who could not move on their own. Kylira followed him, unsure whether she should intervene. She had never seen a human act with such courage. Most species waited for the royal guards or advanced security drones to take control. Elias trusted the humans around him to act together, and they did. In the smoke and confusion, Kylira realized something important. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite fear, to protect others.
Elias did not seek glory or reward.
He risked his life simply because it was...
She felt the pang of shame. Had she ever acted without thinking of her own honor first? By the time the fire was under control, Kylira's mind was racing. She had witnessed human resilience, humility, and bravery, qualities her species considered secondary to status, power, and obedience. Here was a man who refused her offer of marriage, yet in doing so he had shown her a strength she could not deny. For the first time she questioned not just him, but her own people, her own culture. The next morning, Kylira requested a private meeting with Elias. They stood on the observation deck, the gas giant below casting streaks of light across the station's corridors. She spoke carefully, her voice less commanding than usual.
Human you are, unlike any being I have known. You refuse me, you defy expectation, yet you hold power in ways I cannot name.
How is it possible that you are so strong, yet so gentle? Elias looked at her, calm as ever.
Strength comes in many forms, he said. Physical power, intelligence, and strategy matter, but so do courage, compassion, and integrity.
Humans value those qualities because they build trust and cooperation. Without them, power is empty. Kylira considered his words. She had always been taught that to lead, one must dominate. Obedience was a measure of strength, and fear ensured loyalty. Yet, watching Elias, she saw the cracks in that logic. Aliens around him did not obey out of fear, nor did they pretend to. They followed because they believed, and that belief created something stronger than any command. Over the following weeks, Kylira spent more time observing the humans. She saw how they worked in teams, how they celebrated small victories, how they comforted those in despair. She saw them make mistakes, admit them openly, and help one another without shame. She even saw Elias joking with lower-ranking alien officers, listening to their stories, and remembering details about their lives. For Kylira, every observation was a small revelation. Yet, her culture's pressure never left her. Advisors whispered constantly, "Princess," they said, "your honor is at risk. You follow a human as if he were your equal. You allow him to defy you openly. What will other species think of Lytherian strength?" Kylira wanted to ignore them, but she could not fully silence their voices. The tension gnawed at her, a reminder that she was caught between two worlds, one she had always known, and another she was just beginning to understand. One evening she joined Elias in the human mess hall. The room smelled of food and machinery, and human crew members laughed and shared stories. Elias introduced her, and the humans greeted her with curiosity, not fear. They did not bow or tremble. They simply welcomed her presence. Kalira felt uncomfortable at first, expecting ritualized respect, but she also felt something she could not name. Warmth, belonging, a sense of ease that she had never felt in Letherian halls of power. A young human officer approached and asked Kalira questions about her species. She answered carefully, aware of her position but also intrigued by the genuine curiosity in the human's eyes. No one judged her. No one whispered about her royal status. She realized that humans measured beings not by title, but by action and character. The thought unsettled her and excited her.
During a quiet moment, Kalira asked Elias,
Human, why do you not fear offending my people? Do you not understand the risk?
If your words or actions upset Letherians, it could create conflict. Elias shrugged gently. I speak truth and act with respect. That is all any species should expect from me. Beer does not guide my decisions. Understanding does. Kalira stared at him, trying to absorb his meaning. His calm confidence, his unwavering respect for others, even in difficult situations, was unlike anything she had known. For the first time, she wondered whether her own strength was limited by the rules she had always followed. Humans, she realized, were free in ways her people were not. As days turned into weeks, the relationship between Kalira and Elias evolved quietly. She no longer simply observed, she reflected. She began asking questions, not as a noble demanding answers, but as a student seeking understanding. She asked about human traditions, about friendship, about love and family. Elias answered patiently, sharing stories of loyalty, bravery, and even failure. She began to see humans not as weak or strange, but as a species with a unique kind of strength, a strength that depended on choice, empathy, and courage, rather than titles or power. Then came the first test. A faction of Letherian extremists, opposed to Kalira's apparent interest in humans, began spreading rumors that the human delegation was interfering in Letherian politics. Other species whispered that humans were presumptuous, disrespectful, or dangerous. Some even suggested that Elias's refusal of Kalira's proposal was an insult to the Letherian royal house. Tension grew in the station, and Kalira felt the weight of it heavily. She could have forced the human delegation to step back, but she did not. Instead, she quietly defended Elias, insisting that humans acted with respect and integrity. The extremists, however, would not relent. Kalira realized that understanding Elias was no longer just a personal journey. It was a test of her courage, her leadership, and her ability to see beyond tradition. She had to decide whether she would let fear and expectation dictate her actions, or whether she would embrace the lessons she had learned from a stubborn, gentle human. One evening, as the station's artificial sky dimmed to mimic night, Kalira stood beside Elias once more. She spoke softly, almost as if confessing to herself. Human, I see now that your refusal was not arrogance or foolishness. It was honesty. You live by principles my people rarely consider. Perhaps there is strength in your kind that my species has long ignored. Elias looked at her, not with pride, but with understanding. There is strength in every species, Princess. Humans are not perfect. We make mistakes, and we fail. But we value trust, choice, and loyalty above all. That is what gives our actions meaning. Kalira nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and frustration. She had expected a simple answer to her proposal. Instead, she had found herself questioning her own values, her own culture, and even her own sense of honor. And yet, she could not deny the fascination, the pull, the strange admiration that grew with every day spent observing Elias and his people. For the first time in her life, Kalira understood that power was not the ability to command or intimidate. True power came from the courage to act rightly, the wisdom to respect others, and the patience to see the world as it truly was, not as tradition demanded it be. And in that realization, a seed of change took root, a seed that could grow to challenge centuries of tradition, all because a stubborn human had refused to marry her. The station had never been so tense. Rumors spread like wildfire through the corridors, carried by nervous voices and worried glances. A faction of Litharian extremists had begun accusing humans of interfering in their politics, claiming that Elias and his delegation were manipulating the princess. Kalira felt the weight of every whisper, every accusation, pressing against her chest like the gravity of the gas giant they orbited. Yet, despite the danger and the rumors, she refused to step back. She had seen the truth in Elias, and she would not betray it. It began on a quiet morning. The station's alarms blared suddenly, cutting through the soft hum of daily life. Red lights bathed the corridors. A section of the station's lower decks had been sabotaged. Fires erupted, airlocks failed, and the artificial gravity flickered. Panic spread quickly. Aliens and humans alike ran for safety, their shouts and cries echoing through the metal corridors. Elias reacted instantly. Without waiting for orders, he ran toward the danger, calling to the nearest human rescue team. "Follow me," he shouted. "Get civilians to safe zones. Check the airlocks. Move carefully but quickly." His voice was calm but commanding, and the humans responded without hesitation. Kalira followed, uncertain at first, but then her instincts kicked in. She moved with purpose, guiding panicked Litharians away from flames, helping carry those too injured to walk, and coordinating with security teams. She had never seen a human act like this. Most species would have waited for their security forces to take over. Elias trusted his people to work together, trusting that courage and intelligence, not fear or force, would see them through.
War.
Kalira began to understand why humans were admired throughout the galaxy. Their strength was subtle, quiet, and powerful. It was not just in fighting, but in thinking, in caring, in acting without hesitation to protect others. Amid the chaos, a young Litharian child was trapped in a corridor filling with smoke. Kalira sprinted toward the sound, smoke stinging her silver eyes. She found the child huddled in fear. Elias appeared beside her, carrying a small fire extinguisher, moving with precision to clear the smoke. Together, they lifted the child and carried her to safety. For the first time, Kalira felt a surge of admiration and respect that went beyond curiosity. Elias did not act for glory, for reward, or even for honor. He acted because it was right. By the time the fire was under control, the station had suffered serious damage. Floors were scorched, systems malfunctioned, and injured aliens and humans crowded the medbays. Yet, the coordinated efforts of humans and Kalira had saved countless lives. The extremists who had spread rumors about human interference were exposed as saboteurs. They had hoped to blame the humans for chaos and weaken Kalira's influence, but their plan had failed.
Kalira stood beside Elias afterward, her chest heaving with exhaustion and relief.
"Human," she said quietly, "you have proven more than words ever could."
Your courage, your strength, it is unlike anything my people have seen. Her silver eyes reflected the station's emergency lights, but also something softer, awe, respect, and an understanding she had never admitted before. Elias smiled, shaking his head slightly.
"It was teamwork, Princess. I could not have done it alone."
Humans value cooperation, and we trust each other. You helped too. You could have stayed safe, but you did not. Kalira's mind raced. She had acted instinctively, yes, but it was more than instinct. Elias had shown her a different way of leading, of valuing others, of making choices not dictated by fear or tradition but by principle. She felt a pang of shame for all the times she had assumed power and obedience were the same as strength. In the days following the crisis, Kalira's perspective continued to shift. She spent hours walking with Elias through the damaged corridors, observing how humans and aliens worked together to repair the station. She watched Elias delegate tasks, listen to concerns, and encourage everyone involved. He did not demand perfection, nor did he allow mistakes to go unaddressed. Instead, he guided with patience and understanding, correcting errors gently, praising effort, and inspiring confidence. Kalira began to notice the subtle ways humans built trust. A hand offered without expectation, a compliment spoken sincerely, a promise kept even in difficult circumstances. These small gestures carried immense power. She realized that her own culture's insistence on status, fear, and obedience had limited her understanding of leadership. Humans did not rely on fear to maintain control. They relied on respect, on earned loyalty, and on shared purpose. One evening, after a long day of repairs, Kalira and Elias stood on the observation deck, looking out at the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. The silence between them was comfortable, not strained. Kalira found herself speaking first. "Human, I have seen many things these past weeks. I have seen courage, patience, and loyalty in ways my species does not understand. But I also see something else. You act with honesty, even when it is dangerous, even when it is inconvenient, even when it challenges me."
Elias nodded. That is how humans try to live.
We cannot control everything, but we can control how we treat others.
That choice is ours every day. Kalira frowned, but there was a thought in her mind she could not push away.
"And yet, you refused me. Not once, not twice, but consistently. You risked offending my people, risking tension, and you did not yield."
Because it is not right to force someone to act against their beliefs. Respect and consent are more important than compliance.
You asked me to marry you.
I cannot give you what I do not feel. And if a relationship exists, it must be built on choice, not obligation.
Kalira felt a strange mixture of frustration and admiration. She had expected anger, resistance, even fear, but Elias showed none. Instead, he offered something far stronger: clarity, principle, and courage. She realized that his refusal had not weakened him, nor had it weakened her. If anything, it had shown her a path she had never seen before, one where respect and loyalty were more powerful than fear or status. The following weeks brought new challenges. Other species began questioning Letharian traditions, inspired by Kalira's defense of humanity and Elias's actions during the crisis. Some were curious, others skeptical, but Kalira persisted. She spoke of cooperation, choice, and trust. She shared her observations of humans, explaining how their strength lay not in conquest or intimidation, but in courage, empathy, and fairness. Her words were revolutionary. For centuries, Letharians had measured strength by obedience and lineage. Now, their princess spoke of a different kind of power, a power that humans embodied. Kalira faced resistance from her advisors, but she stood firm. She had seen the difference, and she could not ignore it. One afternoon, as Elias prepared to return to human quarters, Kaila stopped him. "Human," she said, her voice quieter than usual, "you have changed something in me. I do not yet understand all of it, but I feel respect, yes, but also something else. Curiosity, perhaps even admiration. And I know this, I will not forget what you have taught me." Elias smiled, a warmth in his expression that did not come from pride. "It is the same for me, Princess. You have shown courage, compassion, and a willingness to challenge your own traditions. That is rare in any species. I have learned from you as well." Kalira looked away, feeling the truth of his words. She had expected to change him, to influence him, but in reality, he had influenced her, and the realization was both humbling and exhilarating. She had never admitted it, but she found herself respecting humans, their values, their courage, and their way of seeing the world, more than any other species she had ever encountered. The station began to stabilize after the sabotage, but the events had left a permanent mark. Kalira's view of leadership had shifted, and her admiration for humans, particularly Elias, grew. She could not yet admit it fully, not to him, not to herself. But she understood that humans had something her species had long ignored: the power of choice, loyalty earned through respect, and courage that came not from fear, but from conviction. One night, Kaelira returned to her private quarters, reflecting on everything that had happened: the fire, the sabotage, the rumors, and the quiet lessons from Elias. It all formed a tapestry of understanding she could not have imagined. She realized that her feelings toward Elias were no longer simple curiosity. She was drawn to his strength, not the strength of dominance or status, but the strength of principle and action. Yet she remained conflicted. Her culture demanded one thing, but her experiences and growing understanding demanded another. She could not force Elias, nor could she ignore what she had learned. For the first time, she understood that choice and freedom were not weaknesses, but the most difficult and courageous forms of strength. The next morning, Kaelira met Elias in the corridor leading to the council chambers. "Human," she said, a slight smile on her face. "I am beginning to understand. Perhaps I will never fully grasp everything about your species, but I see that there is strength in your way of life that my people have long overlooked. I wish." Elias returned her smile. "And I will teach what I can, Princess, but learning is not one way. You have shown courage and insight that I respect deeply. Perhaps we both can grow from this experience." Kaelira nodded, feeling a sense of resolve she had never known. The crisis had tested her, had challenged her beliefs, and had exposed weaknesses in her own understanding. But it had also opened a path where humans and Litharians could respect one another, learn from one another, and perhaps, in time, create something stronger than either species could achieve alone. And so, amidst the repaired corridors and cautious whispers of the station's inhabitants, a bond quietly deepened. It was a bond not of marriage, not yet, but of respect, understanding, and shared experience. Kaelira and Elias were no longer simply princess and human diplomat. They were observers, students, and participants in a journey that stretched far beyond personal pride, politics, or tradition. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and wonder, and the lessons they learned together would shape not only their futures, but the future of relations between their species. Months had passed since the sabotage and the fire on the station, yet the memory of those events lingered in every corridor. Repairs were ongoing, diplomacy was slowly resuming, and whispers of Kaelira's defense of humanity still circulated among the species. Some were skeptical, some curious, but all had noticed a change. The Litharian princess who had once demanded obedience was now speaking of choice, respect, and courage, ideas that had shaken the foundation of her society's traditions. Kaelira herself felt different. The time spent with Elias and the human delegation had altered her perspective, reshaping her understanding of leadership, power, and honor. Where she had once measured strength by status and fear, she now saw strength in integrity, courage, and empathy. And more than anything, she understood the importance of choice, the freedom to act with conscience rather than obligation. Elias had returned to his regular duties, but Kaelira sought him out frequently, not as a ruler demanding answers, but as a student seeking understanding. Together they walked through the repaired corridors, observed human and alien cooperation, and debated principles of leadership. The longer she spent with him, the more she realized that the bond forming between them was not one of obligation or expectation, but of mutual respect and shared insight. One afternoon, Kaelira called Elias to a quiet chamber overlooking the station's docking bays. Ships from across the galaxy glimmered in the distance, engines idling as cargo and passengers moved through their routines.
"Human," she said, her silver eyes serious yet thoughtful, "I have come to a decision."
The lessons I have learned from you, from your courage, your patience, your sense of fairness, have changed not only how I see humans, but how I see myself and my people. I intend to act upon what I have learned." Elias tilted his head. "Curious. What do you mean?"
I will challenge my culture's rigid traditions regarding leadership and partnership.
I will advocate for freedom of choice, for respect and consent in relationships, and for the recognition of courage and integrity above status or lineage. This will not be easy. Many will resist, but I have seen the truth in what you have taught me." Elias smiled, a quiet pride in his expression. "Then you will need allies, Princess." Change is difficult, especially in societies that value obedience over principle.
"I know," she said, "and I have already begun gathering them."
Some of my advisors are cautious but willing to listen. Others are skeptical, but I believe that actions speak louder than words. They have seen your courage, your patience, and the results of cooperation. Perhaps that will influence their judgment. Their conversation was interrupted by a small emergency alert. A supply ship had suffered a minor system failure while docking. It was a routine problem, but in the past, such incidents had often escalated into tense standoffs between species. Elias and Kylira acted quickly, coordinating human engineers and Letherian technicians to stabilize the ship. The crew worked together, and within hours, the ship was safely docked. The success was noticed across the station. Many aliens approached Kylira afterward, asking questions, expressing curiosity, and quietly praising the collaboration she had encouraged. Later that evening, Kylira and Elias stood on the observation deck, the station bathed in the soft glow of the gas giant below.
"You see," Elias said, "even small actions can inspire change. People notice when leadership values trust, respect, and fairness."
It spreads quietly, but it spreads. Kylira nodded. "I see that now. And I also see something else. You have taught me that strength is not in power, but in choice. You refused me, yet in that refusal, you have shown courage greater than any throne could offer."
I respect that more than I ever expected to respect anyone.
Elias looked at her, a warmth in his eyes. "And I respect you, Kylira. You faced danger, challenged your own culture, and defended principles that were unpopular. I have learned from you as well." For the first time, Kylira felt the absence of tension between them. There was no proposal, no expectation of compliance, only mutual respect and understanding. Their bond was something new, a connection built on shared experience, lessons learned, and admiration earned through action rather than titles. In the weeks that followed, Kylira took bold steps to implement change. She introduced new policies within her court, emphasizing fairness, choice, and cooperation. She encouraged human delegates to share insights on diplomacy and leadership with Letherian officials. Slowly, resistance softened as results became clear. Crises were managed more efficiently, alliances strengthened, and respect for humans grew across the station. Kylira's efforts did not go unnoticed. Other species began to question their own traditions, inspired by the success of cooperation between humans and Letherians. Trade and diplomatic relations improved, and a new atmosphere of collaboration emerged. Kylira realized that Elias's influence extended far beyond personal lessons. It had reshaped the culture of her people, and even the broader galactic community. One quiet night, Kylira approached Elias again. "Human," she said softly, "I have been thinking."
Our bond is unique. It is not defined by expectation, title, or obligation.
"And yet, I value it deeply. Perhaps one day, when circumstances allow, it may grow into something more." Elias considered her words, then smiled.
I feel the same.
"But for now, let us focus on what we can accomplish together, understanding, cooperation, and the strengthening of both our peoples. Everything else will follow in its own time." Kylira nodded, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. She realized that respect, trust, and shared purpose were stronger than any obligation, and that bonds formed through choice were more powerful than those forced by expectation. She had come to understand what Elias had always known. that courage was not only about action, but about integrity, empathy, and the willingness to challenge one's own assumptions. Over the following months, Kalira's reforms began to take root. Marriage and partnership within Litharian society gradually incorporated principles of consent and respect. Leaders were encouraged to value integrity and courage over lineage or wealth. Humans were consulted more often in diplomatic matters, not as subordinates or subjects, but as equals. Kalira had created a ripple effect, guided by the lessons Elias had quietly imparted. Through it all, Kalira and Elias maintained their bond. They continued to walk the corridors together, share ideas, and learn from one another. Their relationship was no longer defined by a proposal or by status, but by understanding, respect, and trust. Each day they discovered new lessons in leadership, courage, and humanity. Lessons that would shape not only their personal lives but the future of interstellar diplomacy. One day, as a new group of ambassadors arrived from a distant star system, Kalira turned to Elias with a small smile.
I think they will find humans as unusual as I did at first,
she said.
Elias chuckled. And perhaps they will learn from us, as you have.
Yes, and perhaps in time the galaxy will learn that strength is not in domination but in choice.
That courage is not in command, but in compassion. That loyalty is not in fear, but in respect. Elias looked at her, admiration in his eyes. You have already taught that lesson to your people, Princess, and I have no doubt it will continue to spread. Kalira's silver eyes reflected the light of the distant stars, and for the first time, she felt unshackled from tradition and expectation. She had learned to respect humans, their values, and their courage. She had learned that true strength lay in understanding and choice, and she had learned that bonds built on respect and shared experience were the strongest of all. As the new ambassadors were guided through the station, Kalira and Elias walked together, side by side, discussing strategies and observing the bustling activity. They no longer needed to speak of proposals, refusals, or expectations. Their partnership was now defined by what mattered most: mutual understanding, shared principles, and the quiet but unbreakable trust that had grown between them. Kalira knew that the galaxy would continue to challenge her, that old traditions would resist change, and that not every species would embrace these new ideas easily. But she also knew that she had the courage, the insight, and the understanding to face those challenges. Lessons she had learned from a human who refused her, yet had taught her more than any tutor or advisor ever could. Elias, too, knew that his presence on the station had changed more than he had imagined. He had taught, yes, but he had also learned about courage, about leadership, and about the power of choice. He had come to see Kalira not just as a princess or a student, but as an ally, a partner in thought, and a friend whose courage and insight matched the best of human ideals. The station, once filled with whispers and tension, now buzzed with quiet optimism. Humans and Litharians worked together, sharing knowledge, coordinating trade, and fostering understanding across species. Kalira's reforms slowly reshaped expectations, and Elias's presence symbolized a new model of interstellar cooperation, one built not on fear or obligation, but on respect, courage, and choice. And in that bustling, glowing hub orbiting the gas giant, two individuals, a Litharian princess and a human diplomat, stood together, observing the galaxy and the lives they were helping to shape. Neither had been married, neither had been bound by force, but both had forged something far stronger, a partnership built on understanding, a bond of mutual respect, and a quiet yet profound trust that could withstand any challenge the universe might offer. Kalira smiled, turning to Elias. Perhaps one day we will understand even more about each other. But for now, I am grateful for what we have learned, and for what we have achieved together. Elias nodded, returning her smile.
As am I, Princess.
The galaxy is vast, but together we can make it a little brighter, one choice at a time. And with that, they continued to walk through the station, side by side, two beings from entirely different worlds, connected not by expectation or obligation, but by understanding, courage, and the quiet power of choice, a lesson that would resonate across the stars for generations to come.